we are live. I'm so sorry, everyone, for the confusion and for the delay there. I had a little bit of technical difficulty, but thank you so much for taking the time to listen and to join. And I'm so thankful to the Speed Invest team for inviting me to speak. So to get right into it, welcome to everyone. So a little bit about me, as I think it just flashed on the screen. I am currently a partner on a new fund called AirAngels, which I'll get into a little bit later on. And I'm also the head of operations and finance at a Series B startup in New York called Runway. So how did I get to be invited to speak here? I feel very thankful, but a little bit on me and kind of my pathway into marketplaces. So for a very long time, I thought that I would be a corporate lawyer. I'm excited that that didn't work out. My first job out of undergrad, I was working for a large family office hedge fund in New York on the legal department, and kind of randomly got assigned to supporting a portfolio on the private side. And this was in 2014 or so, before we saw the big crossover funds like Tiger and Coatue. And that portfolio made over $1 billion in investments in fintech companies, kind of the first big wave of fintech unicorns like Lending Club, Prosper Marketplace, Upstart, etc. And that was really my first exposure to the idea of high growth startups, to venture capital, and specifically to marketplaces. And I was really energized and really excited by that. And I wanted to go work for a company that was like that. So I was fortunate to join what is now the experiences team at Airbnb. And I think Airbnb is kind of one of those generationally defining marketplace businesses. I joined when Experiences was still in private beta and helped to launch and scale that to over 160 countries. And I'll get into that also in a little bit more detail later on. After my time at Airbnb, I went to business school. And after business school, during business school, I was working at an early stage consumer tech focused venture fund, investing in a lot of different types of businesses, but especially in marketplaces. So that's kind of the journey of my professional career over the last several years, and a strong kind of underlying current in that was all marketplace exposure. And so that brings us a little bit to what I'm going to talk about today, which is finding marketplace success internally and externally, and how to really bridge the communication across cross-functional stakeholders and across different teams. So as a bit of a reminder and to give a little bit more context, a lot of my experience and what I'm going to talk about today skews a little bit more consumer. And this is obviously not going to be what's applicable all the time. I love the line from Anchorman, which is 60% of the time, this works every time. So I think that's a pretty good benchmark for maybe what this framework can help you with. And also, this is in regards to how do you make sure that you feel balance internally as you're scaling a company or scaling a product or a service really quickly, while also trying to find balance across what you traditionally would think of as like the external facing side of the marketplace. So either with Airbnb, with hosts and guests, with Uber, it could be drivers and riders, etc. So, and I apologize, I'm not using the presentation mode, and so I'm losing all of my transitions here. But when I joined Airbnb in 2016, this was, I joined when the team for Experiences, it was still called Trips at the time, Magical Trips, was still small, and we didn't have a live product. About a year later, we were live in 45 markets. We saw about 8,000 experience bookings a week, 3,500 global experiences that were available for users and for guests to book, and almost $1 million in bookings revenue. About a year later, the goal was to be live in 700 markets, to have tens of thousands of more experience bookings and experiences available for people to book, and obviously tens of millions in bookings revenue. So the problem was how we were going to scale to that degree. And to give you a sense of, this is how we had gotten to the point of 2017. A lot of internal spreadsheets, another set of internal spreadsheets that many teams were using. And so we thought, okay, well, this almost broke us to get to where we are today. How are we going to do this even more exponentially quickly. So understandably, many of us felt like this. And so what I learned from my time at Airbnb and looking at a bunch of different marketplace businesses is this. I believe that you can apply this with marketplace businesses. I think it's applicable to individuals, is that the outside is very much reflective of the inside. And I don't believe that a company can be a successful marketplace if the internal organization and the internal communication is not working well. And so to that end, if your cross-functional collaboration and communication isn't working well, this will greatly disadvantage your ability to succeed in achieving your goals, whether they're product goals, whether they're business metric goals, whatever, and deliver on a really wonderful consumer experience. So then what can you do to avoid, I would say, this, and this? And so I like to think about a solution or a framework in which you're thinking about a target and which you're thinking about a bow and arrow. So what does that really mean? So what we realized on experiences was that there were a whole host of different teams that were working towards the experience product going live, being accessible to host an experience, and being accessible to guests to book an experience. This was just a short example of this. We had legal, we had content, we had compliance, we had trust and safety, we had PR, we had operations, partnerships, community meetups, etc. And what we were really realizing is that operations, and in here you'll see that they're kind of under this term hunting, they were looking for experiences that would go live on the to put on our platform. They were really driving the ability for experiences to be live. They were our host allies. They were the ones that were on the ground. They understood what the demand was and also what the supply constraints or the supply was in that country or in that specific city. And legal was doing a bunch of research on making sure what was legal in that country, what could work, what couldn't work. And these two were the teams that we were seeing had the biggest disparateness in the timing in getting a market to launch. And so that was kind of the beginning of my realization for this bow and arrow. So to break this down more specifically, we were identifying, okay, we want to go live in X number of markets, or we want to go live in this specific market. That's the target, or for us, that was the objective. The product at that point was already built out, but if you're thinking about this from a product perspective, it may be, okay, we want to make this available in Australia, we want to make this available in EMEA, whatever that may be, and you have to build towards what that product specific goal is. Second, and this is kind of where the bow, specifically in the bow and arrow, comes into play, is it was important to identify the most crucial function to deliver on that objective, on that number one, on reaching that target, and the function that is holding up the delivery on that objective. So specifically, I would say in this analogy, our operations team was the tip of the bow. They're going to drive the rest of the team and drive the rest of kind of the alignment on how to get to launch in that specific market. And in this case, unfortunately, and I don't know if a lot of other people would agree with this, legal was kind of the tail end here. It was holding up, it was pulling things back. And once things were actually aligned, the arrow could move forward towards the target. But until this was all pointed in the right direction, everyone was lined up as to where this was heading. It was just a lot of tension and a lot of friction. And so, you have to align both the tip and the tail of the arrow in order for it to go in the direction that you want it to go straight, to go fast, to go high, whatever the analogy is that you want to use there. And everyone in between along this line then, you want to make sure that they are, once the two parts of the arrow have synced, have aligned, have figured out what they both need to do in order to reach that target on time, then everyone else needs to be bought in, everyone else needs to be read in, everyone else needs to be kind of assigned what they need to do in order to make this all go smoothly. And then, that's supposed to not say that. So we'll just go. You're supposed to hit the target. So what at Airbnb and specifically on experiences, and there were a lot of different teams when I was working there, and there continue to be more teams as the company continues to scale, that were the biggest issue, that were the biggest, I would say, drivers for the tip and the end of the arrow were legal and operations. If you speak with folks at other organizations, at other companies, at whatnot, for example, they would say that product and go-to-market are that tip and that end of the arrow. In other companies, maybe Figma, for example, or maybe other specific, more marketplace type companies, it could be marketing versus design. I mean, you can kind of thread this needle, you can kind of find the 2 points as you need, but it's really identifying the tip and the arrow and the end of the arrow that are the most important. And so just kind of as a recap, the order of operations is this. You want to identify and make sure that everyone is aligned and understands what the priority and what the business critical objective is that you're trying to achieve. Whomever designates who those 2 crucial functions are need to do so, whether it's happening at the group level, whether it's a leadership decision, whether users are kind of showing that these are where they're experiencing a lot of frictions, and those 2 teams need to be identified. The tip, what's going to drive, and the end of the arrow, which is kind of maybe the holdup for delivering on that objective. Once that alignment has happened, getting the rest of the cross-functional stakeholders who are involved in executing on this set up along that arrow is really important to making sure that the directionality, that the speed, that everything is going to go according to plan. Of course, it doesn't always go according to plan, but as best as possible. And then kind of delivering on that, I would say, is what we all hope for. And this can be applicable to fixing, let's say for us, we were constantly trying to make sure that we had enough supply, enough diversified supply in each market. But at the same time, not every market had the same amount of demand. And so we were constantly thinking about, okay, adjusting the supply side versus adjusting the demand side, and what levers we could pull, what market specific business metrics that we needed to reach. And so this was obviously market specific, region specific, and it was dynamic, given seasonality and whatnot. And so whether we were aligned to, whether we were addressing something that was on the host side or whether it was on the user side was constantly changing, but this framework kind of stayed the same. So yeah, that is, I know that I went through that really quickly, and if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer. I know that we have a few more minutes right now, but thank you so much for joining. And that's kind of all that I have right now. And I guess that I can speak to a little bit on the AirAngels side. So myself and 2 other partners, all formerly of Airbnb, launched a fund earlier this year called AirAngels. We are a $20 million early stage fund focused mainly on pre-seed and seed opportunities, and are always looking for marketplace investments. I would say that the 3 of us were different stakeholders across the organization during our tenures there, across product, business development, operations, project management, et cetera. And so we're really excited to invest in companies that are not just coming out of Airbnb, but that we feel are generationally defining the same way that Airbnb is, and are always excited to look at opportunities and to leverage our own understandings and our LPs' understandings as to what we can bring to our portfolio companies. And so if anyone is interested in either learning more, we would love to speak with founders who kind of match that, who are looking for either investment or looking to leverage, hopefully, our expertise. Definitely feel free to reach out. But that